But I guess what I want you to do today is I'm going to take you down maybe a different road than you might be thinking when it comes to conflict resolution. I'm going to ask you to open your minds and be willing to look at it maybe slightly differently than you thought. Now, when I was thinking about what I wanted to present to you today, someone I was talking to said, well, you're going to give them a conflict resolution model, aren't you? And I said, well, I could. But instead, I'm going to give you something different. I'm going to broaden your view, hopefully, of conflict, and I hope that you'll take at least one nugget away from today. Today, the agenda is to go through some conflict awareness skills, tried and tested techniques to deal with conflict, effective strategies to prevent it, hopefully. The conflict's going to happen no matter what. And then I've got homework for you at the end, so there's an assignment that you'll get. I take a coach approach to most of the things I do, and talking without action is merely a conversation. So I'm hoping that you will act upon some of what we're talking about today. So to get right into conflict, I thought I'd take the dictionary definition and see. What does it say? So dictionary definition is to come into collision or disagreement, be contradictory, at variance, or in opposition, clash. Generally, when people think of conflict, I think they think it's a serious disagreement or argument. Is that fair? Like when you think of that word conflict, generally speaking, it's thought of as something that's, yeah, serious. Is that fair? Do you agree, disagree? You disagree?
I disagree.
Okay, excellent.
I disagree because I think it's the difference between conflict and a fight.
Ah.
And you're giving, I think, the definition for a fight.
Ah. This came right out of a dictionary. Interesting.
It might not be the one that I have at my house.
No, but that's true. But I think when I think of conflict resolution strategies or models, it's usually because something serious has happened and we need to pull out a model with which to fix this serious piece that's in front of us. So what I want you to think about today is, I want you to broaden this view. So awesome that you disagree, because I'm moving on from this, which is good.
Yes. I think there's a degree of conflict as well, because I can have a conflict in my calendar.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe the definition is where intervention is required, or where action or remedial action, something is required.
Okay, awesome. Well, that, I have to give out my adult gifts. Very serious, very, very serious. And I'm serious, you're going to want it when it's over, when I tell you what it means. It's not just a duck. There's method to my madness. Yes, Bob. AKA Charles. Oops.
Yeah, that's okay. I think what changes the whole thing are the emotions. And, I typically don't show emotion when I'm disagreeing with someone. I try to use my rational brain and have a discussion with someone, but I often find that the challenging part is dealing with kind of an emotional overreaction to a situation that I don't think requires it.
Right.
And I'm not criticizing the other person, but sometimes I think it's kind of either overboard or, beyond the context. So to me, I don't necessarily disagree with the definition, because certainly you can have disagreement without emotions. And people can explain their respective positions, I think, respectfully, and have a good dialogue about it and find common ground.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me, what I have a challenge with is the emotion piece.
Sure. And the variance of the conflict is going to depend on the emotion. And that old rule that if you're highly emotional about something, you should walk away, sleep on it. But in the moment, sometimes we don't always tuck away our emotions. So yes, emotions make it messy, no question. No question. Years ago, I was sitting, I worked in this office floor, like as big as this office with no walls, and I was at the end in a glass room, and this employee came in to me, and if I was sitting there, she went, and she just started to yell. She was yelling, she was screaming, and I could just feel, right? I could see everybody stopping what they're doing and looking at me in this little glass office at the end of the room. I was a young manager at the time, and I don't know why I knew to say this, but when she was done, I said, "Are you done?" And she said, "Yes." I said, okay, now tell me what's really wrong. And she did. Because I think sometimes if we get sucked into the emotion, we then get sucked into it. And often, in this case, as an example, it wasn't about all of that. It was just where she was coming from an emotional place. We were able to sit down, have a conversation, and it was fine, relatively speaking. I mean, she was still having problems. But I think it's how do we manage that emotion. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yes. Anything else at this stage? Yes.
Sorry. I can probably relate everything to the sales aspect.
Sure.
And one of the first
Sure.
things I teach is never take it personally, which is what
Mhm.
Charles was saying. And it's the different levels of emotion. Bigger the sale, the bigger the emotion, the bigger the personal, negative if you reject my offer. So as long as you can just look at it from the facts, right, and take it as a business proposition, then let's get on with it.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think we have this propensity to make it about ourselves. And I just think, wow, aren't we little arrogant people walking around going, ooh, it's all about me. The truth is not. But we make it about ourselves. We take it on, we carry it. And if we can separate ourselves from that, we're so much more powerful because it's not about us. When someone's going crazy outside of us, it's not about us. It's about whatever's going on for them. And we're going to talk more about that too, because I agree.
Question for you then.
Yes.
I don't need a duck, but
Okay.
if you can take the personal aspect out of it, could it be that the higher and heighten the emotions, the more personally involved they are?
Yes,
Yes,
for
for
sure.
sure.
You bet. For sure, for sure. The messier it is, the more that's going on for them that's probably got less to do with what's going on. Or, I'll give you an example. A boss of mine one day absolutely pissed me off, like to a degree that I was like incensed by it. So my normal course of action would be to step back and wait for a minute. And I thought, no, wait, I'm going in. So I went in and I said to him, okay, I want you to know I'm upset. I'm going to say some things. I'm not going to say a lot because if I said it, it would upset you. But I'm just going to tell you why you know how upset I am, and I'll talk about it tomorrow. Because in that moment, I needed him to know that what happened was not okay. And that it bothered me so much that I wanted him to see the emotion and that we would talk about it the next day calmly. Because I think sometimes, in that case, it was absolutely invested. But when I stepped back and looked at it in more detail, there was so much more that I needed to learn about myself that was causing it to happen. So keep that in mind. The other thing about this is, and this is all coming from my psychology degree that I got out of my Cracker Jack box. So to be clear, okay, I don't want you to think I never pretend to be somebody I'm not. However, I've spent lots of time learning about people, and that if something's going on in that discussion, let's say you and I are in conflict, and something's going on in your body, and you're feeling something going on, there's something going on for you that you need to learn. And generally, it's a mirror that's saying, oh, there's something that you need to learn about yourself in this moment. And that's normally when we engage because something's pushed our buttons. So be mindful of that too. You know that adage, you point one finger out, you got 3 pointing back? Pay attention to those 3 because they're trying to tell you something. Yes, Jen.
I had a friend once who had a saying about that. He said, what you spot, you got.
Yeah.
If you see something in somebody else that
Yeah.
pisses you off, it's
Yeah.
probably because it's something about yourself you don't like.
Same on the flip side. If I were to ask you who you admired most, and you wrote down all the attributes, you just described yourself. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Both sides. If you don't believe me, try the exercise. Do it at home. Write down who you admire most and think about yourself. And go, oh, aren't I good? But it's important that we admire both sides, right? That we take a look at what are our strengths and the areas that maybe when someone does push our button, because it's a symbol of us, it's all about learning. So,
It's interesting, I find, when I looked at that definition, I find the word variance very gentle.
cool. Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
And maybe if we looked at things as a variance, there might not be a clash or a
Yeah.
collision,
Yeah.
or our emotions be contradictory. I find that very interesting word to use. I don't know, that's just me.
In contrast to the collision and
Totally.
whatever, which
Mm.
sounds like
A
disaster.
Yeah, I just find that very interesting,
Yeah.
that's all.
Well, and I don't know why our society has come up with the idea that conflict is a bad thing. It doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to
Differing
be.
of opinions or different points of view, that's exciting. Those are opportunities.
Mhm.
And so, to your point, if we looked at these as opportunities instead of things to fear, we might act differently. And if we keep ourselves out of it, which is one of the most important keys, so thank you for saying so, Lydia. Lydia, right? Yes. I just said thank you for saying about taking it personally. If we can separate those things, we're going to be much more powerful. So let me get into what I want you to think about today as a definition. So conflict on a day-to-day basis can be provoked by three things: my needs, my interests, or concerns being at odds. So needs, interests, and concerns. So what I want to do is I want to spend a few minutes talking about each one of them and what I mean by that. So let's go to needs. So again, got a dictionary definition as a place to start the discussion. So the dictionary says, you're going to get PowerPoint in a minute. I just wanted to get us started before I handed them out. So in the dictionary it said needs are a requirement, necessary, duty, or obligation, a lack of something wanted. So if you were to think about the needs of your employees, it could be external, internal, because you've got different views that you want to see today. What are some of the needs that need to be met in order for them to feel comfortable, a part of your organization, association, a part of, yes?
Acknowledgement, financial needs, or
Okay.
compensation.
Great. So acknowledgement, compensation,
Respect.
respect.
Safety.
You bet. Okay, can we just describe safety just for a second? Who said it? So when you say safety, what do you mean? I just want to make sure.
Well, I think there's lots of different
Yeah.
aspects to safety. But safe in your, if it's a work environment where the conflict's coming up, you want to know that you are speaking in a way that will not come back.
Right.
If you're speaking honestly, that it shouldn't come back to haunt you when you were trying to contribute and those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Safe in the fact that the company I work for is going to be around tomorrow. Is that another safe thing? Because some people, it's really important that they are working for somebody that they think is going to be around a long time. Although the only thing about business today has changed. So, okay.
It's kind of job
Security,
security,
yeah.
or stability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That things would be held in confidence, for example.
Sure. So think, okay, keep going. What else do you see when you think of needs? Think of your own needs. What do you need? Broaden this spectrum out of just conflict. What do you need on a day-to-day basis in the associations that you work with?
Satisfaction.
Satisfaction.
Just say trust.
Yeah.
What else?
Engagement?
Sure.
That's huge.
Bob says trust.
Trust?
Trust.
Hi, Bob. Thank you, Bob.
No, I think it's Lydia.
I'm thinking of the physical environment, they need a comfortable place to work, or
Okay.
whatever.
You know, it's interesting, when we go into organizations and we do assessments on their HR, the very first thing I always look at is this. I can tell right away when I walk into an environment how overall they're meeting the needs of their employees. It's quite the tell.
Oh, so then definitely work-life balance, because that's a strong need for today.
Okay. And knowing that work-life balance means completely different things to different people.
Absolutely.
Right? Because that whole notion of balance, you know, I look at Jimmy Pattison. He's got great balance in his life, and he works 90% of the time. So again, it's just acknowledging that that's different for different people. Okay, yeah. Support. Support. Sure.
And a big one, I think, you know, the more senior you are, is authority with responsibility.
No. You don't want them to be able to actually do the work too, do you? Oh. There's nothing more frustrating than having authority or one or the without the other. Absolutely.
clarity and expectations.
Oh.
Opportunity to grow.
Mhm. Opportunity to grow. So looking at all of these needs as a starting point. So imagine for a moment that a conflict has arisen within your environment. I want you to start thinking about, is a need at odds? So let me tell you, remember that story I told you about that boss of mine that I got really upset with? The need that was in question at the time was respect. What had happened was he had overridden a decision I had made. I was the senior vice president. You know, this thing over here kind of got blurred. And out of, in my opinion, disrespect, he made an action. So when I was upset and there was conflict in our environment, it was about this. And I think part of what happens is we don't spend enough time thinking about where might it come from. And I'm not asking everybody to turn into, you know, psychologists with your own Cracker Jack box degree. But I think we have to think about it's coming from somewhere for some reason. And do we spend the time to actually find out, or do we just engage? Because when we're emotional, we want to engage in that conflict. So I want you to start thinking about, these are some of the triggers that can happen. If my needs aren't being met, I might engage in some conflict, right? I might be in conflict with myself if my values aren't aligned with your association, your organization, if something's happened that opposes any of these. And you know what? I was going to write down some thoughts for you around needs, and I thought, oh my gosh, they are so broad and so wide and so deep. And they're going to be different for everybody. And if you're recruiting people within your associations that are aligned with your values, are aligned with where you're going as an organization, they're aligned with your culture, then this list will become more clear about what the needs are of the people that work for you, if you spend time looking at it. And I think, you know, people say to me, well, I should have a, you know, like I said, conflict resolution model. And I said, well, let's start with, where does it come from? It's happening for a reason. Can we figure out what that is so that we might address it differently? So let's move on from needs, because I want to give you some more examples of how it shows up in the workplace. What about interests? So interest says to engage or excite the attention or curiosity. Something that concerns, involves, or draws the attention of or arouses the curiosity of a person. So what's interest, do you think? Think about interests within your association. What are interests?
Well, this could be someone's job description, or it could be their areas of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And
Sure.
I think that from time to time there can be conflict, sort of with, in terms of what they see, you know, that they need to get done, the demands on their time.
Right.
And especially if it's coming from their boss, you know, maybe the interests won't jive, or there can be a conflict of interest.
Right. Yeah, or conflict of interest. So areas of responsibility, what do they need to get done? Job descriptions. How many times, I'm sure it never happens here, but you have employees that work within your organization that maybe shouldn't be there anymore. Maybe they shouldn't have been there for a long time and we don't deal with it. You've got employees that areas of responsibility, they're not handling things to the degree that they should be. So they're in conflict and you're in conflict with them, but you don't deal with it because you hope it'll go away one day. I'm going to give you some more examples of how it shows up in your workplace, but think about the fact that when these needs aren't met, when interests aren't aligned, if I don't feel safe, you know, I have an example of a young man once in an organization. He was this bright light. He had just graduated from BCITHR, and he was like this, you know, little Odie coming out, he was excited. And he used to tell jokes to people, and everybody enjoyed him. You know, he never crossed that line. And he was walking around, he'd tell jokes, and he had that spark. One day he told a joke to somebody, and they didn't like it. Or they didn't say anything. But that person started to tell people on the team that she didn't like it. And that person told that person and told that person. At no point in time did they tell the boss because there wasn't an environment that was safe to do that. He kept telling jokes because no one said anything. Literally 6 months later, the team went to the boss and said, we can't take this anymore. So the team leader, in her less than wise judgment, decided to pull a team meeting together. Sat this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, brilliant young man and had everybody tell him why he was inappropriate. His light went out that day, and he was gone 3 months later. And I hope to this day that that light came back. Because in that moment, as an organization, we have a duty to take care of those things. If you know something's going on, don't avoid that. Don't avoid that kind of conflict. You gotta hit it straight on. What if you looked at it as an opportunity? What if you cultured your employees? Cultured meaning you developed a culture that said, we want open dialogue. I think conflict happens when we don't talk to each other. It's all about communication. It's when we keep stuff inside and we don't talk about it. Think about any kind of conflict that's ever happened. I think the root of it is not talking about it. Not recognizing where it might be coming from. You know, what kind of support did he get? He didn't get any. Nobody came to HR. He lost trust. It's for me one of the saddest stories because it didn't have to happen that way. If just one person would have said something. So thinking about your association, your organization, what kind of support do employees have to say what they think? And how often do you let people sit in organizations, in your organization, that shouldn't be there? Because if they're there and they shouldn't be there, you're causing conflict all over the place and maybe don't even see it. Because if I'm sitting alone and I know that employee shouldn't be there, employees know, don't they? They're not stupid. Who looks bad? When you're not dealing with an employee, who looks bad? You do.
The leader.
Absolutely you do. And all of a sudden, I as an employee don't feel as safe, don't feel as respected. I don't feel like I'm being treated fairly because somebody else is allowed to do less than I. So I think conflict shows up all over the place. But we maybe don't always recognize it as that. And so it's thinking about how can you eliminate, not eliminate, it's never going to go away because we're human beings, this stuff shows up. But how can you make sure that you're paying attention to what that is? So interests. What about career growth? What about what do I get to do next? How about the idea that one of our clients, who I adore, it's a nonprofit association on the island, her motto is, you are not allowed to park yourself at the door. You have to come in as all of you, right? You're not allowed to come in and change who you are when you get in. You have to come in as yourself. Boy, when people are allowed to be who they are, you want to get interest, you want to get creativity, you want to get involvement, engagement, you want to get rid of some of that culture or that conflict. The new conflict might be learning from one another and learning what the differences are of each other. That stuff I think is exciting. How can you embrace the fact that there's differences? What else about interests? When you think about interests, something that excites me, something I'm curious about, what else?
I'm not really clear on this, but would sense of belonging or team,
Sure.
that sort of thing?
Sure. And that could be here, it could be here. There's no wrong answer here. What I want you to do is start thinking about conflict slightly differently and see that it comes from many different places. And if we acknowledge that it came from different places, how might we deal with it differently?
You know,
Fairness and equality.
Yeah, sure.
You mentioned park it and come in as a whole.
Yeah.
I had a leader that always used to say, leave your ego at the door.
Yes, that's an awesome one.
That is such a good one, and there's such truth in that.
Yes. I'm going to put egoless over here. Because it's our ego that makes it about us. That little, that little voice in our head, that's what it's all about us.
That was worth the duck.
Oh, it was. Thank you. Thank you. I used to say I've never hit anybody. but I
Thank
hit
you.
somebody.
Oh, how cute. Thank you.
It's very cute.
Very sweet.
Okay, so
Thanks, Lydia.
doing interests, what about concerns? Yes, sorry, yes.
Learning opportunities.
Absolutely. Learning, growing. So thinking about someone wanting to learn some stuff about generations. So I just did a workshop recently it was so cool, with 80 guys.
Is that the cool part?
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. Now what I did is I broke these 80 guys into generations. And so there was about 60%, 70% were Gen Y. About 10% were Gen X, and the rest were boomers. So what was cute was the boomers did a skit around, they had this whole place, they had this one black man with this amazing voice, and he was, I've got a dream. And so they were smoking dope and following him. The middle group, the Xers, were having real life conversations going, oh, I really care about you, and they're sharing their emotions. And the Ys are going, oh yeah, whatever, it's all cool, man. If I need an answer, I'll look it up on Google. So when you're thinking about growing and learning opportunities, you gotta think about where am I in my career? If I'm a boomer, they were happy to like smoke dope and follow the big handsome black man that was going, I got a dream. The Ys, they need to grow and to learn and to be taught nicely that you're not going to get the world tomorrow. You actually have to earn some of that. But thinking about that within your organization, what is it that they need? Each one is different. And I'm not saying, I read something recently that I loved because I agreed with it. So of course I loved it, right? There's another, that mirror thing. That basically said, when it comes to the generations, some organizations want to separate them and say that they're all very different. The truth is we just all have different needs. So how do you as an association uncover what those different needs are? How do you know so that they're on this track for learning and growing? If I'm learning and growing, that's one of the most important things generally that an employee wants out of an organization, is that they can learn and grow within it. So if I'm being stifled and I'm not feeling like I have an opportunity to grow, again, conflict's going to arise. Because I'm going to start to feel not as happy in the role that I'm in, and who knows how that shows up. Because that's the other thing. Conflict shows up different ways depending on what's being affected. Okay, what about concerns? Definition says a matter that engages a person's attention, interest, or care that affects a person's welfare or happiness.
Adequate compensation?
Sure. If my needs and interests aren't being protected or respected, all of a sudden that's going to be a concern for me. If I don't think my compensation's fair, if I don't think the practices that are in place are fair, if I don't think I'm being treated consistently. You want conflict in your associations, your organizations, ignore stuff going on. We have a duty to inquire. That is our job. If we think something's going on that shouldn't be, we need to check into it. It's our jobs as those who are in leadership positions is to find out what's going on. If you just let it go, that's when conflict can grow. If this organization with this thing that happened for a year would have dealt with it early, oh my God, you can't imagine how much time I spent trying to get that team back on track. And I don't know that they've ever really gotten back on track. So thinking about conflict again, think about where does it come from?
That's interesting because you lose the respect and the credibility of the leader
You
at
bet.
the helm.
You
And
bet.
that's a real tough one to move forward with because it's that history that people sometimes keep within them.
You bet.
And, yeah.
This stuff, man, that causes conflict within an organization, yes.
I think when you address an issue,
Yes.
the timing is also something
Yes.
that has to be taken
Yes.
into account.
I would agree.
Critical.
Mhm.
So I know, for example, without getting into all the details.
Yes.
Oh, come on.
But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'll share it with you, but.
Under the cone, what happens in this
Yeah.
room
Yeah.
stays in this room.
No names.
So, I have a specific, couple of initiatives that I need to get launched in about a month and a half's time. And I know that my staff are working extremely hard. And, but so I have a need,
Yes?
and that need is that these new initiatives need to be launched, about mid-April, late
Right.
April. And their sense of it is because of our challenges with technology, which I won't get into, they don't feel that that's doable time-wise. And on Friday, I basically drew the line in the sand, and I said they have to get it done.
Right.
I'm willing to compromise, maybe we can delay it by a bit, but, I think that's sufficient time, 6 to 8 weeks to get this up and running. And so I know I've created some conflict.
Right.
And it was late Friday, unfortunately I had to leave, and I couldn't resolve it then. Plus I knew it could have been another hour of conversation. I wasn't in the office yesterday, I'm not there this morning, but I know there's chatter going on.
Sure.
But I think it's good.
I agree with you. I think
Because I think the
conflict would be a
timing-
good thing.
Because I think the timing, if I dealt with it on Friday, I don't think it would have been, emotions were getting,
Sure.
were coming into play too much. And I always low-key the emotion from my perspective. They don't think I'm emotional enough, but I think I just like to be in control of my emotions as best I can when it relates to professional work. So I know they're discussing it. I have a second in command who's probably working on a solution right now.
Right.
And I'll inject myself at the appropriate time.
Cool.
So I think timing is critical.
It is.
You can't always address conflict right away because I think it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, it has to make sense. If I can just make a couple of points to it real quick. Couple things come to mind with that. So when it comes to providing feedback, there's the idea of the immediacy effect. So if I see you in the middle of a conflict, or if something's happening in the moment, that can often be the best time to have the conversation because it's real. I can't escape from it. I can see that something's happening. However, you have to go about that properly. You need to make sure that you've made it safe, that you ask for permission is now a good time to have a conversation with you. Make sure they say it's okay. Because if you want to have it with them and they're not ready to have it with you, then don't have it. Because they need to be prepared.
But I think validation is very important. I mean, you talk about timing, but I think validating the concerns is of equal importance, and maybe not addressing it at the time, but at least validating the concerns.
Yeah, and I did do that.
Yeah.
I did understand the
Yeah.
technology challenges, but I think in the end, I summarized it as I think the initiatives can't be handcuffed by the technology.
Right.
And so we need a workaround, and until that problem is resolved with technology, it shouldn't stop us from, in this, it's about a public or a member engagement initiative, and you don't hold back on it. You can't say we're not going to engage our members because we're not ready with the technology. To me, it kind of sounds like we're putting the technology ahead of our membership.
But
Oh,
yeah.
it does sound.
So,
Yeah, well,
so notwithstanding technology as an issue or a challenge, what about individuals who are supposed to execute? The perhaps lack of self-confidence?
could be.
Maybe it isn't there that we can get this done, and then the chatter starts.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's technology. They're very competent staff.
Something, go ahead, Jen.
I was
and
just
then
gonna say, this same friend who had lots of really good sayings, another
Yeah.
one was knowing how is knowing when. So it may be now, it may be later, but.
Yes, absolutely. And something to add to that is, so imagine an elastic, I don't have one, so imagine an elastic band. So when it comes to a productivity within an organization, if I've got elastic band that's limp, that means that I don't have enough on my plate, I'm not busy enough, I have too much time to spend thinking about other things. If the elastic's tightened, you're going to increase your level of productivity because there's just enough pressure. There's just enough tension to keep it comfortable. You want to be careful that you don't give them so much tension that the elastic snaps, because then that's not effective. But it's making sure that within your culture, what level of elastic band stretching do you employ? Because part of it, I think, is cultural. If somehow they allow technology to overcome producing for a client, there's a disconnect there around member services. So again, thinking about that, I agree with you, acknowledging it, having a conversation. It's a great opportunity to do some tweaking around expectations around what member services look like. So, and those conflict, another opportunity for growth, change, moving forward, looking at needs, finding out what's being affected right now, what's stopping them from doing it, asking some good questions. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. I'm always about asking and not telling. If there's a conflict within in your organization at any level about anybody, start asking questions. You know, Stephen Covey's seek first to understand, rather than to be seek first to understand, then to be seek first to understand, then to be understood, so that you're stopping and listening and going, okay, before I start squawking off at the mouth, respectfully to all of you, I do that, I used to. I listen first, and just listen, so that when you're responding from a place of pure knowledge, because you actually understand where they're coming from. And what if you thought of these things? What if you thought of the things that might be getting in their way? Lydia, you can hand up the PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
What if you thought about the things that might be getting in their way? How might you address that conflict differently? How might you? What might you say differently? So here's something I wanted you to see. The 5 top reasons that people stay. This was a survey done, 19,000 employees were surveyed. And there's tons of different surveys out there, so don't get caught up in the survey so much. But exciting work and challenge. So I put down that as a need. So part of what I need in my organization is exciting work and challenge. I want career growth, learning, and development. That's an interest for me, so you're probably about page 2 or 3, I think. Working with great people is a need. Fair pay is a need. And employees need supportive management and good bosses. So imagine there's 4 needs and an interest there. If any of those are out of sync, it's going to be of concern to those employees. And conflict will arise somewhere in here if you as an association organization haven't dealt with this. And we talked about what that stuff looks like, what it can look like from the employee's perspective. And looking at this again, sort of that pay thing, we talked about compensation being a concern. The idea of pay, it's never first. It's usually anywhere between 4 and 6, depending on the survey. And I always use the 80-20 rule. If I know that my pay is treated or handled fairly and consistently, and I trust that the way that the company manages it is good, it's fair, whatever that means, fair, it becomes about 20% of the equation. If I don't think it's fair, if I don't think that I'm being treated fairly, it becomes a concern and it becomes about 80% of the equation. So again, thinking about the top reasons people stay, and when those are not in alignment for them, there's going to be conflict. Thoughts. Am I right? Am I wrong? Throw it out. Thoughts. And there's ducks on the line here, people.
I find that in dealing with fair pay,
Yes.
it's always about bringing someone from the outside, a consultant, that's
Adds
done an assessment.
validity. It adds validity, for sure. But I think what matters so much about that is, I don't think anybody has to have some fancy compensation system. I think it just has to be clear how you handle it. It could be written on a piece of paper like this, depending on your size, if that's what works. But if I can say to my team, this is what we do, and this is how we do it, and I know that I look at it consistently and fairly, whatever our system is, I think that's what matters. And, you know, external people have an opportunity to add validity to it, for sure. Yes?
A lot of times, the team who are getting compensated like to have input in various ways of being compensated. You know, if this is what they want and they can't get it, then they like to be able to offer an alternative and be able to get that and receive that.
Yes.
And make it fair to everybody. And how often does that happen?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean,
Oh, good, a duck.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
A duck.
Thank you for reminding me. I'm sorry. You want one now?
Yeah, thanks.
That's a tough one because it depends on your culture, it depends on your size, it depends what you've done in the past, it depends what you hope to achieve.
What are your resources?
What are your resources? Can you afford it? Yeah. I don't have one solution ever for HR related stuff because it's different. Every time someone asks me something about HR like that, I go, well, he needs to I need to ask you these 10 questions first so I can properly advise. Yes.
Somewhere along here, could you add something? The need to create conflict. With my board development, oftentimes one of the time bombs is apathy.
Sure.
So, you know, you have to encourage healthy debate, which
You bet.
is conflict, and then when there's individuals like yourself that, you know,
Head for the door. Yeah.
right. And you've got a short period, and you've got to create some
Sure.
healthy debate. So could
Sure.
you touch on that either now or later?
Absolutely, and I can touch on it a bit now and a bit later. I think healthy conflict is a good thing. It's more though, I'm gonna talk about communication in a minute, and I think that's really more what it's about, is it safe for me to have that? Not all organizations, and boards are a great example of how you can learn from going from dysfunction to function, because it's a tough system, right? You're bringing people in from different walks of life. Some of them are invested in the board in a different way. So how do you get that healthy conflict? Well, you have to set up safe environments to do so. How many times do you sit around a room like this and you're in your association, your organization, and you ask someone, so what do you think? I'm asking you guys right now, what do you think? Somebody says nothing. So one of the things I do now is I say, okay, you say nothing, you've just said yes. So be really clear that when we walk out of this boardroom, you've just agreed to everything we've talked about unless you say otherwise. But I think healthy conflict is amazing. It's about engaging people in dialogue, but I have to be safe, and it has to be set up that way. And it has to follow, I think, past the board to the employee level across your organization. And how do you do that? Again, it's all about your culture and how do you set that up. I think healthy conflict makes for healthy teams, healthy boards, healthy executives. But that's not easy to get to because ego gets in the way, I make it about myself, there's all kinds of things that can happen. But one of the things I'm going to talk about in a few minutes is just the idea of creating a culture of communication. What does that mean? How can you set that up so it's successful? Because if there isn't healthy conflict, if people aren't saying things to you that maybe you don't want to hear, you're missing out on great opportunities. I want people to say to me, I don't agree with that. You know, in our office, I'll give something to, this for example. You know, I gave to Chantel yesterday and said, you know, be brutal, and she's like, well, when am I not? You know, I hand stuff into my team, it comes back with more red ink on it than you could shake a stick at, and I think that's cool. But you have to set up that kind of a culture. It has to be safe for me, right? We talked about needs. It has to be safe for me to say what I think. I see so many employees, something as simple. There was an employee that I was coaching, and she came to me and she said, I keep meeting with my vice president, and there's this acronym on this spreadsheet, and it says CRA or something. It wasn't Canada Revenue Agency, but it was something like that. And she said, every time we meet, I don't know what it means, and I want to ask. And I said, well, just ask. She was so afraid to ask. And I said, what's the worst that can happen? So she got herself all prepared, you know, sat down with him and said, John, I don't know what this means. He goes, well, I don't either. I never paid attention to it. He had no idea. Senior Vice President was talking about these things. He didn't know what it was either. So we make it up in our heads that somehow it's not okay to say I don't know. Healthy dialogue says I don't know. Let's talk about this. I don't agree with you. Good start.
Those last two sentences were,
Okay.
I don't understand. Don't agree with you, let's talk about it.
Yeah. But we have to have a culture that says it's safe to say I don't know. And even if you have a culture that says it's safe to say I don't know, employees have been bitten at some point in time, guaranteed. The majority, not all, but the majority. So you have to bear with them, you have to give them time to be okay to do it. They have to overcome their fear of that conflict of saying, oh, if I say something, someone's going to think I'm stupid. Yes.
Sorry. Something that just happened in the moment before we started with Terry's topic, and I want to share this with you because it was about what you commented caused me a twinge of internal conflict.
Oh, cool.
Right?
Awesome.
And
Bring it on.
I thought,
Couch is available.
and I thought, no, that wasn't it. It was about the duck.
Yeah.
When I said I didn't want,
Yeah.
I didn't need the duck.
Yeah.
But this time I wanted it
Yeah.
because it was about being validated in my comments. I didn't think the first one was worth a duck.
Oh, cool.
And when you said, oh, now you want one, it's like, well, I wanted it before, but I didn't think it was worthy.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
But you
Isn't that
made this
awesome?
safe for me to say that.
Yeah, but isn't that awesome? But that's what it's about.
Okay, that's stuff worthy.
Oh, yes. But gosh, oh, you got goosebumps.
Oh, thank you.
And I see I haven't hit someone again yet so far.
I could just imagine that in your
But
phone.
guys, but that's what you want to encourage in your organizations where there's talk like that. You know, one of the other things I do when I'm doing workshops within teams is at some point in time, guys, I'm guessing, I've seen it in a couple of you, you leave the room mentally, you're gone. Boom, I'm gone. And then at some point you come back. You have no idea what you've missed. You don't. You could have missed like the jewel of the day. So I have dialogue with that with teams and say, okay, the chances are you're going to leave. So let's acknowledge that when we leave, we're going to say, hey, wait, I might have missed something. You know how many board meetings, how many executive meetings, how many team meetings people check out at different times? It's no wonder there's a broken telephone at the end that says, oh, didn't we say that? No, we said this. No, I thought that. It's no wonder it happens. So I get them to acknowledge that, hey, I left the room. Can I get caught up? You will always see me telling you, if I've left, I'll tell you I left. Because I don't want to miss anything. So those are the kinds of things that you want to create a culture that people are okay to say that. I had one team that we did this with, and they, like every 2 seconds, I'm like, God, am I that bad? Is this that bad of a meeting that you guys are constantly leaving? Because that's another sign too. Something's not working if everybody's leaving. So how do you engage in dialogue? How do you get people to communicate? How do you make it safe for someone to say what you just said? I love that, Val. Thank you.
How? Oh, yeah, you're saying how? How?
Well, part of it is-
If I leave here mentally, I'm not gonna come back and say, oh, yeah, okay, can you repeat that? I sort of missed it.
Well, see, the idea is if you create an environment that's safe, I would hope that you would. And as the facilitator, as the leader, that's your job, is to make it safe so employees want to say what they think. It is incredibly difficult in an association board layout. Depending on what your relationship is with your board and how much they get into the day-to-day and how much they stay out, but you have complete control of how you communicate with your team and how you engage them and how you cultivate a culture that's about communication. And I promise you, you can make it safe by just being open and honest yourself. You know, I used to, when I first started doing workshops and stuff, you know, I went to Toastmasters, which I love and I would highly recommend, but I learned how to, I used to stand up here and I'd talk to you from here. Not quite as compelling as talking to you from here. So I show up as I am. If we come in and we're leading meetings and we're showing up with that little ego sitting on our shoulder, chances are we're not going to make it safe. And I'll tell you, board environments are tough. I actually spend a fair amount of time with boards, and they're not easy. They're not easy. Your environment when there's a board structure is not easy. But what do you have control over and how do you cultivate it? We're going to talk about some examples as we go.
But it's not easy through my experience most recently when you have a bully on your executive team.
You bet.
And a big bully, and to a point where even my leader, who is supportive, great boss, was also bullied. And it was just so evident and so clear and so, I used that word earlier, debilitating. Now this bully is no longer with our organization, but I knew it in the first 3 months. And it was tricky for me as part of the executive team to address it with my supportive management, my good boss.
Yeah.
And you know, I used all my coaching skills possible. But it was almost, excuse my French, like a bitch session every Tuesday morning when I'd have my one-on-one with my CEO. It wasn't even about the area of productivity that my team was doing. It was a bitch session, and it went 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And when I was getting back, I understand. Well, there was no change until the real bully came down and bullied. I mean, using the words in an executive committee meeting, blah, 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 blah. And did this, blah, 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 when you brought up anything. And it was so tough. And perhaps if we had taken this course a year ago, maybe things would have been different. But it took a whole year. And, you know, you talked about go from dysfunction to function. We're just going into that function mode again. Right. A whole year was lost. I had never ever experienced in my umpteen years of being in the workplace, ever experienced something that was so bad.
It's hard.
It was
I'm
crazy.
working with a board that's like that right now. And
Ugh.
the bully has tried to bully me. And it doesn't go over very well with me. But those are tough waters to navigate. And I think when you're in times like that, I think those are the times to ask for some help. Because that's tough. A bully in a decision-making position is really tough to move, especially when other people around them are, giving into the bullying, letting it happen. Open dialogue, when I got pulled into this particular board, I'm about putting that elephant on the table. Let's talk about stuff. We can pretend it doesn't exist. Working with another board of directors that are owners of a company. And I keep saying to them, you're never going to be effective if you don't get your shit together. But it's tough. So, I could comment on that right now, but that would, be a sit down and coaching thing. And here's the thing.
But I was so emotional telling you the story as well.
I was just going to say, look
Exactly.
at the impact it had on you, and I get that.
The craziest thing on
I
earth.
get that. I get
And
that.
it was
Breathe
terrible,
deep.
terrible. But a
No,
whole
but
year
that's-
was lost.
But think about
So
what it
bad.
affected in you. Think about how it affected
Everything.
you. Sure.
Ugh, beyond.
So
But I had to be the cheerleader for my team because
Yeah.
they kept coming up with, and it's a tough call knowing and not knowing because I didn't know what to do. All my coaching courses that I took, everything failed. It was
It's tough to go up against a bully.
beyond.
And part of it has to be
Oh,
that
of course.
assessment about whose responsibility ought it be
Yeah.
in this scenario to come forward and change things. Is that mine? Is it somebody else's?
Mm.
Is it my boss's and they're not acting?
Mm.
And then you don't wanna overstep when you see that somebody else should be doing that and you're thinking, how long are we gonna let this ride so far out of
Yeah.
what should be? But sometimes you're in that boat. If you feel like somebody else should be the person who should be saying, hold on a minute, let's take a step back, and they're not doing it, then is it your job to overstep them?
Well, you know what I think? I think when it's a board structure, what's difficult is everybody's got different motivations for being on the board. They're invested only as far as they're invested, and I think those investment levels are different. But what we have control over only, for sure, is ourselves. So if you know that these are the buttons that are getting pushed, so if you know those, what are they? And how do you get your emotions in check, as you were saying, so that you're not coming from an emotional place? I think the toughest thing is, what do we need to learn about this environment? Why is it bothering us? How is it affecting us? So, I went through a point where, I had been sort of in that bullying environment. That doesn't happen now. I diffused a bully the other day. It was interesting. I was coaching an HR person and she said, wow, he's never acted like that before. But part of it is, I don't react to them anymore because I learned what it was that was affecting me. The buttons it was affecting, that pushing, that mirror thing again, so that I don't show up with any stuff. It's like, it's kind of like when you're single and you're looking for a date and you got that aroma going on. Well, bullies can smell fear. So they know if you're a target or not. So all we have control over is ourselves. And I feel for you because there's nothing tougher. And I think it puts us up against ourselves in ways that I couldn't have even imagined. I had one that used to physically hit me when no one was watching too, so it was verbal and physical. So it's interesting. But again, I looked at it, what can I learn from this? What can I take away from this? So that if it comes up again, I know what to do. So I'm asking you to be your own psychologist. Get your own Cracker Jack box for yourself. Because all we have complete control over is ourselves. And what we learn and how we handle things. And when conflict comes our way, how we deal with it, how we communicate, how we put the elephant on the table, how we don't. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to because it's a lost cause. I don't know, sometimes I think boards feel like they have a right to misbehave. I don't know what that is. I've seen it too many times. But all we have control over is ourselves. So, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the journey.
Oof.
So something else to think about, guys. Here's another area of conflict, and I think this one is the most challenging to deal with. It's the stuff you really don't have control over. So I come into work and I've joined your organization, your association, and my values are not in alignment, but I haven't checked that out as I'm going in, and you haven't checked it out as I'm coming in. So something's off in our value proposition. So conflict turns up for me all the time because I'm not valuably aligned. I've got anchors that I need to satisfy every day when I come to work. It's not happening. But you don't know that because maybe you haven't tested or maybe you haven't looked for it. I'm not saying you even should, except for the value piece. I think that's an important alignment. But something is happening at home. And something's triggered stress at home. An employee can come into work and completely be unreasonable, and it has absolutely nothing to do with you. So there's the stuff that you see, there's the stuff that you know, but what's hard is how do you deal with, like that employee, remember the one that did this? It had nothing to do with what was going on at the office. It had everything to do with what was going on at home. So that's the other thing to keep in mind. That, I had a couple of employees one day come and have a conversation with me about things that they were really upset about with what was going on with the organization I was with at the time. And it completely made no sense to me. It was not aligned in any way. And that was the first time that I really realized it more than I'd ever before. How you come in and you make it about the company you're with. That's a tough one to protect yourselves against or to deal with. But be mindful that that's what it might be. And if it is, then find out. Again, inquire. Is there anything I should know? Is there anything going on? And sometimes people will say no, but it depends how safe you make it. And sometimes you don't want to know, actually. Because maybe it's something that you can't even remotely deal with. But I think what I want you to think about with all of this is the idea that conflict comes from many different places. And when we're feeling conflict inside, know that it's something that we have to learn. If we learn that ourselves, man, can we be great leaders. Mm-hmm. We can help others learn it for themselves and help them overcome it. And I think the one that causes you the most problems can make you the most proud. Because they're just trying to do the very best they know how. And sometimes they're noisy. And the quiet ones, too, they can make you just as proud. But they're more quiet about it. So you got to balance all of that stuff. So I'm going to give you some tips on what I think you need to do or what you can do to overcome this. So, solid HR practices. I believe HR's role is to protect, to increase productivity, and to cultivate a culture. This isn't some board says, ED, that culture thing, can you take care of it for me, please? Culture is something that's grown amongst both the board and the office themselves, ideally, which I know is difficult treading. So let's talk about protect for a minute. So if we're talking about needs, so I'm talking about making sure that within your organization, your association, you have employment agreements, handbooks, performance programs. Well, that's more productivity. Things that make sure that I know that I'm being treated fairly and that I understand the rules of the game. It's also about protecting the association and the organization. If I know that we have an employment agreement with each other, I know that I'm protected and the organization's protected. I understand exactly what's expected of me. When it comes to things like handbooks and making sure that I understand what the rules of the road are. If I understand how compensation works, how everything is handled within the company I work for, I tell you, lots of these needs, you know what, we go into organizations and there's noise. We put this stuff in place and there's no quiet. They find other things to worry about later. But we quiet this one channel of noise. You want me to be in conflict? Make it clear that don't make it clear to me where we're going as an organization, what we're trying to achieve, and how I can help us get there. You don't tell me that, how am I going to know? I'm going to make it up first off. I'm not going to lie about it. I'm just going to answer the question. Because if you want to answer it for me, I will. So make sure you have systems in place that promote productivity. Make sure I know what I need to do to get where it is you want me to go. You want to shut down the idea of conflict. Make it clear to me. And culture, make sure that you're hiring the right people for your company. Make sure you're checking about value alignment. What is your culture? How do you describe it? There's an article on our website, if you ever want to go find it, called Culture Shock. And I tried to work on the idea that I wanted just people to define it in some way. You know, I'm part of the professional development team for HRMA, the HRMA, the Human Resource Management Association. And I was teaching a group of 30 HR professionals about culture. Okay, these are people that do this for a living. And I spent the first hour just trying to get us on the same page with some language that we could all agree with. Culture is a big, fat, messy thing. And what matters is that you identify it. I don't care what you call it, just be clear what it is and cultivate it. There was an organization that had 1,000 employees, and one day the two owners were walking, doing the Steve Jobs walk. They were saying, I hate coming into work every day. And what they realized was they let their culture get away from them. In order to get it back, they had to move out 500 of those 1,000 people. No small cost to an organization. Massive cost to them. So, you want to shut down conflict in your organization? Make sure that all of your HR systems are in place and are solid, and that you aren't hiding behind stuff. That if there's conflict, meaning there's somebody in your organization that shouldn't be, do something about it. If there's stuff going on that you know about, deal with it. Don't pretend it'll go away. It doesn't. I wish it would, because trust me, I practice what I preach. Every single time I say this to you, when I come up against it myself, I know that I've told you the same thing, and I get off my butt and I do it. And there are days that I would rather put my head in the sand and hope that, beyond hope, it'll go away. But what if we looked at it as an opportunity? Because obviously if it's not working for both parties. And we have a right and an obligation to help someone move on to something better and brighter for them. So you want to stop conflict, you want to lessen it, get your HR practices in place. Are you clear about that? Oh, you guys are quiet.
Yes.
Are you listening? Is this good? This is good? Okay. Solid leadership and management. Okay, this is like a massive topic. So here's my thoughts. People don't leave companies, they leave managers. Full stop. You have the greatest company in the world. You got a manager that can't do their job, you're gonna lose good people. So conflict within a workplace starts at the top. At the very top. I had this HR professional come in once and do this they wanted to put in a compensation program. So said to the CEO, you gotta put in this compensation program. CEO goes, no, I don't want that. You gotta put it in. I don't want that. He finally gave in. Said, fine, put it in. So she puts in this fancy model that he had to, this box that she put him in. And he said to her, so they launched it. So the very, very first time he does a performance program, or a compensation meeting with one of his VPs, he says, well, if I were to follow this compensation program, you know, what's her name put in? You'd only get about a $2,000 raise. But because you did such a great job, I'm giving you 10. So in that moment, he negated everything that she had put in place. So both were at fault. She should never have asked him to put something in place he wasn't willing to follow. And he should never have allowed it to happen either. So when I say it starts at the top, you want to make sure there's alignment. If there's not alignment, there's going to be conflict. And there's nothing worse than conflict at the top, because what do employees see? They see that. You want to stop conflict? Work on the organization as a whole, that holistic idea. Yes?
I think it depends on the size of your organization too, because we've grown quite a bit. And it used to be a lot more casual. We didn't have employee manuals. We didn't have a lot of stuff written down. And it used to be, because we have, well, 2 or 3 big events a year, like the golf tournament, our awards program, and different things, that all of the staff would go to these events and help out. They'd do registration, they'd welcome, they'd put stuff, they'd participate. And as a reward, usually it's 3 days between Christmas and New Year's, we just shut down, everybody would get those days off. Now we've grown, there's 14 of us, and some people don't like to come out to the event, so they don't come. And so then there's this whole thing about, well, it's not fair. They should get the day off because they didn't help out. And we've had to implement this, okay, well, if you did, and it's a lot more work, number one, keeping track of it all, but I don't really think there's an alternative.
Well, I think it's about cultural alignment. I think it's about making sure that you hire people with the understanding or expectation that as part of your company, you expect this, whatever this is, whatever it is. I think so often we don't hire on purpose. We don't make sure that we're asking the right questions. I was interviewing an HR person yesterday for one of our clients, and I said to her, how are you going to assess whether your alignment your values are aligned with our client. And she said some stuff, and I said, okay, well, what are your values? And she didn't know. So if you don't ask, they're not gonna know. If you don't know what yours are and how the alignment is there. So this is a senior HR person, doesn't know what their values are. So many organizations don't pay attention to that as much as I think we need to. We need cultural alignment, we need value alignment, and then we need to make sure all of our practices marry up to that. So that when you are interviewing, you're saying the things that you do and the things that you expect, so that they know that, hey, if they're gonna come in here, there's gonna be these events we're gonna go to, we're gonna have a great time. And if it's not something that they want, find out early. So that you're creating that culture. That's that company of 1,000. Part of the problem was 500 people, sort of as a metaphor, didn't want to do that. And they said, forget it. If you're going to work for us, all 1,000 of you have to align with what we believe. It's not going to work. And it's a lot more work. I agree. And if you do that, there's a lot less turnstile stuff. A lot less people leaving, a lot less conflict. But it's more work. Because you have to do it on purpose. Culture not done on purpose, it gets away from you. I actually interviewed another HR person yesterday that said that the culture was driven by employees. To be clear, I didn't hire them for this client. Because culture is driven first by the leaders at the top. What kind of culture do they want to create? And then our jobs are to cultivate that. In an association board structure, it's more difficult. So then the culture is usually driven by the ED. So the ED I told you about in Courtney that says don't leave yourself in the parking lot. You should see the culture she's created. It's crazy fabulous, but it's all about her. Not her, it's not about her. It's what she believes in. And everybody that comes in believes in it. Everybody rallies around it. They have this little moose, because there's like this book about these moose calls that mean something, and there's like 10 things that mean something special around leadership and communication and stuff. I'll tell you, you come, you go through her little training session, you get that little moose, everybody's completely proud of that moose. That's her culture. That's what she created. And everybody rallies around it. When we do it on purpose, wow, that's where the power is.
So you'll tell us what the duck means.
Yes,
Yeah.
we will. Absolutely, I will. So do your leaders and managers have the knowledge, skills, and ability to do the role they've been assigned? If they don't, shame on you. Do what you have to do to get them there. And I say shame on you and the other 95% of the organizations that have managers that don't have the knowledge, skills, and ability to do the job. I think the important thing is acknowledging it and figuring out what you need to do. Because if that's happening, there will be conflict in your organization, in your association, full stop. It can't not be. Communication culture. Okay, so I'm going to zip through this stuff, because what I did with this is I pulled in some stuff from another workshop I do, because I just wanted to give you some things to think about. So I just wanted to give you some stuff to take away. So communication culture. So first, if you're building a communication culture, here's one thing to think about. What if after every single meeting you ever had, no matter how big or small, you asked yourself this one question: what do I have to communicate? Who do I have to communicate it to, and who's going to do it? What if you just did that after every meeting, after every board meeting, after every staff or 2 meeting? I'm meeting with Jan, and we're going, what do we have to communicate? Who are we going to communicate it to, and who's going to do it? All of a sudden, communication would start to be better than it is today. And you know what? I think that's such a simple thing, and I talk to people about it all the time. I'll go back and I'll go to a meeting, and they're not doing it. I'm like, God, how hard is this? Communication, I think, is the most difficult thing. But again, you want to squelch conflict? Talk. Communicate. Speaking and listening. So I'm just going to breeze through this. The idea that if you really want a communication culture, it's about seeking first to understand. Asking, not telling. Thinking about the needs of an individual when you are having communication with them. What is it that might be going on for them as you're finding out what here might be affected, and some basic needs that I need as a human being. So questioning tips. I'm going to just talk about this for a sec. One of the things that I love that you said is that I want to fix it. Well, probably we all want to fix it. But if you want to give me the greatest gift of all is don't fix it for me, help me fix it for myself. So ask me good questions that will help me come to my own resolve. There are times that you're going to need to give your subject matter expertise in whatever it is. But if we ask and they learn it on their own, it is so much more powerful. So much more powerful. So try and stop yourself from telling, asking first. What if I stopped what I'm about to say and asked a clarifying question? This one is just a tip. Never use the word why in any kind of dialogue about anything. Because as soon as I say to you, so why didn't you want the duck in the first place? What am I saying to her?
It's accusatory.
Absolutely. And even if I didn't say it like this, if I said, why are you wearing a pink scarf? In that moment, it implies something's wrong. And I can tell you if you're having any kind of dialogue around conflict or anything, don't use that word. And it's something you got to really practice because you have to reframe what you're about to say. And when you reframe, you'll see how much more powerful it is. Because now you're not coming from a place of accusing, you're coming from a place of inquiry. That's when it's powerful.
People get defensive.
For sure they do, immediately. And often the communicator doesn't mean that. You could be clearly just inquiring. But that word in and of itself says something different.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take that out of your vocabulary, force yourself to reframe it. And I don't know if you noticed, but you'll never hear me use the word but. I always use the word and. That's another word that if you're having a dialogue about conflict, you're talking, then I go la la la, but let me tell you what I really think. So I've just erased everything you just said. I wasn't really listening because I'm going to tell you, but let me tell you what I think. So the power in communication is the words that we use, the way with which we frame what we frame, and our intention. So there's some stuff there to think about. Like I say, I do a whole workshop just on coaching and around the use of listening and all of that. But I wanted to at least give you some tips. Giving feedback. Here's some key things. And I think feedback is almost anytime we want to have a conversation with someone, is make sure you ask for permission. Ask them to ask for permission. Get really clear what it is you're trying to achieve. At the bottom it says, ask the giver a sandwich technique. It's in there, but I hate the sandwich technique. I mean,
You went to Toastmasters.
Oh, I did.
That's
I did. But the sandwich technique, my goodness. Okay. Oh, you look really nice today. You're wearing that pink scarf, and then you've got that black jacket. Oh, by the way, you suck. Oh, and I love your shoes. Like, seriously, we can try to do the sandwich technique thing, but the truth is I'm going to remember the fact that I suck. That's what I'm going to hear. So what if we just communicated I sucked in a way that I could hear it without having to fluff it around? I think feedback can be really powerful if we're coming from a really, really good place. Our intention is really clear. We ask for permission. We set up a safe environment with which to have the dialogue. That's when communication can be powerful. And you know what? If you like the sandwich technique and it works for you, then please don't take it out. But I'm using but now. I don't agree with what I just said, to be clear. And I just think there's better ways. And if you're giving feedback, another little tip is the idea that you say, great job. And you're thinking, I just rocked whatever I did. But maybe I think it was a great job for something different, and I don't tell you. If you just give attaboy kind of feedback to somebody, it's kind of like giving them a chocolate bar. They get that chocolate rush and then it's done. So make sure they're really clear what it is that they did well. I don't know how many times I get feedback over the time and go, that was great. Well, what was great? What was great? I don't know. Was it because I wore black? I don't know. Could be anything. So find out. Be really clear why you're giving feedback and then give it on purpose. So what I want you guys to think about is, how do you need to be different to give feedback? And how do you need to be different to make sure you have an impact on the people that you work with, internally or externally? What do you want to do differently about conflict than maybe you were going to do this morning or yesterday? For example, be more courageous, supportive, challenging, relentless. Don't let it go. I think it takes courage to give feedback. And it's the greatest gift you can ever give. Have you ever gotten feedback that came from a good place, that was honest, and it was tough to hear that you didn't want? Don't we want to just know so that we can do the best we can? If you want to lessen conflict, talk. Have those tough conversations in the moment. That makes sense, right? Because in that moment is not always the best. So whenever it makes sense. So who have you been avoiding giving feedback to? Just asking, what do you need to say to that person? When will you do that? Just throwing it out there. If there's anybody in your life that you've been wanting to have a conversation with, I encourage you to do it. Because the longer we let it go, the further the relationship goes. We think day after day, it'll just go away. It just means we get further apart from one another. Whether I'm an employee or a friend. Because employers are looking at you as a leader going, what's going on? Oh. And all kinds of stuff starts to happen. Conflict underlying happens. So in summary, conflict can occur daily for lots of reasons. And I hope what you take from this is that it can happen for lots of reasons. And that it isn't just something's blown up. It's all the little stuff. It's all the stuff that makes me not feel at ease. Have solid HR practice in place. Okay, besides the fact that I'm an HR professional, doesn't matter. You should have it anyway. I would be trumping this horn even if I wasn't. Solid HR practices help you, I promise. Have solid leadership and management in place. And if they're not, give them the tools they need. Create a communication culture. What does communication mean? What do you expect when it comes to communication? What are you willing to do? How are you willing to put yourself out there? So your homework is to you'll go to the assignment page, and I want you to just answer these questions for yourself. What do you want to accomplish? What can be different? What action plans can you develop and carry out? What will keep you from being successful? And what will you do and when will you do it by? So what are some things that you're taking from this that you can employ today, right now? What's a nugget that maybe you took away from yourself, about yourself, that you can take away and live from now on? I love this quote. What lies before us and what lies behind us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. We are rich jewels, each one of us, all of us. And when we can uncover that and live our best lives every day, wow, business can flourish, we can flourish, life can be lovely. So the duck. But before I do the duck, I want to do a quick go around the room. It's 9:33. I need like 2 more minutes. Quick go around the room. What's one nugget you're taking away from today? One thing. One thing. One thing. Jen, you want to go?
Sure. I would say listening. Listening more.
Awesome.
And not assuming that I know what's going on.
Awesome. Oh. If listening were a muscle, it'd be the weakest in the body. So if you want to practice something, wow, that's a yummy one. Fabulous. Bob. I'm going to see you in public and call you Bob now.
Okay. I guess there's not just one thing. I think a lot of it is just some reaffirmation that things I've been doing are probably right, and then maybe some fine tuning on some of the things I can do a little bit better. But I've never seen conflict as being a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think it just leads to a better place in the end. And especially with employment or employees in office, where in the past, not with current employees, I think sometimes rooting out a bully, someone else suggested.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a position that you can do that,
Mm-hmm.
I think is a good thing to do sometimes in challenging what they've done.
Do it anyway. It is as difficult as it can be. But I think we have a choice on how we view conflict. And if we choose to view it as an opportunity, we might look at it differently. So, thank you. Yes.
I think same with Olivia. I never had to face conflict, but I think now learning to ask questions so that also to avoid conflict in case something does come up and inquiring about it.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you.
Like Bob said, there's lots of good stuff, but I think with me, more about addressing the needs and where the conflict's coming from that point of view.
Cool.
And it's not personalities or expectations, but can also feed it.
Right. Awesome. Thank you.
Two, really. One was never using the word why.
Excellent.
And also, I got a blog on my website, and I talked about the bully in the boardroom.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was enough substantial information based on what you were saying. I need to go back and do a version 2.
Awesome.
Make it a little stronger.
Awesome. Awesome. Fabulous. Abby, send it to me when you
I
get it.
can
Send me a link.
contribute. If you'd like me to be contributor blogger.
I'm always looking for guest
I'm
bloggers.
kidding.
Awesome.
That's
Thank
fun.
you, yes.
Viewing conflict as an opportunity, but also the same as you, when I feel something coming up inside of me, being able to identify what need it is of mine that's not being.
You know, I gotta say, I think that's one of the most powerful things, because if we know what's bugging us, we can course correct it, right? Oh, shoot. If I would have known that in the moment it was respect that was getting in my way, I could have just said, oh, okay. Well, that's me, it's not him. So that to me is one of the most powerful gifts I've given myself.
Yeah, it feels like it would be.
Cool.
You know, we keep saying that conflict isn't a bad thing. And for me, it is really how I will personally grow and not becoming a better leader, but being a best leader on behalf of my team. So that's really critical for me.
Awesome, thank you.
I think for me it's about it's the same as what you said. It's like sort of identifying what's not being met or what needs aren't being met, and then getting courageous enough to actually say something about it rather than just nodding
Cool.
and agreeing silently.
Awesome, awesome, awesome.
I think that my issue about feeling the need to fix things is not out of line. I think that we want to work in harmonious environments for the
Yes.
most part. But what I think that I got here is that I don't necessarily need to fix it myself, but I can give people the tools with which they could fix their issues. A little more often than I do. That would be good.
Yeah, if we could stop and just first ask, give them the tool, ask them what they need to do, because we're quick to answer, but we don't help them learn how to fish, and we just give them the fish. So it was one of the most powerful gifts I gave myself too, is that idea that, hey, wait a second, I don't have to have the answers, but I have to help you find them yourself. I think that's a gift that we give. If we can give that to each other, wow, very cool. Thank you. Yes.
I like never using why and act, not what.
Cool.
Not and I learned that a conflict not necessarily is a bad thing. Just sort of how to deal with and good time.
Great. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure to be here today. I'm glad that you took some nuggets away. I hope you enjoyed my version of conflict. I wanted you to look at it slightly differently. And it's been a pleasure. So thank you. Thank you for having me, Jen.
Thank you.
Explain the duck.
Oh, the duck. Okay, so you ever have that negative voice in your head, the one that says I can't do this or I can't do that, or you're about to go after something and you think, oh, how am I going to do this? Well, that's that negative voice, right? That's that ego talking. Next time, just tell that ego to shut the duck up.
Oh my God.
And
that's cute.
you have all your ducks in a row when it comes to HR. That's the other thing. But really, it's about shutting the duck up. I'm glad you laughed.